This is a story that still has no answers. She had less than 10 minutes. That's all it took. A crash on a dark New Hampshire road. A passing bus driver who stopped to help. A promise that roadside assistance had already been called. A police cruiser dispatched almost immediately. And when officers arrived, she was gone. Not wandering down the road. Not sitting in a nearby vehicle. Not lying injured in the snow. Gone. No footprints leading deep into the woods. No sign of a struggle. No confirmed sighting ever again. On February 9, 2004, 21-year-old Maura Murray vanished into the freezing night, and more than 2 decades later, no one can say with certainty what happened in those missing minutes. But here's what makes this case so unsettling. She didn't just disappear. She left behind clues. Strange emails. Withdrawn cash. Alcohol in the car. A rag stuffed in the tailpipe. A scent trail that ended abruptly in the middle of the road. It wasn't just a disappearance. It was a puzzle, and every piece seemed slightly out of place. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand Maura before that curve in the road. Before the flashing lights. Before the silence. Maura Murray was not reckless. She wasn't known for dramatic outbursts or running away from responsibility. She grew up in Hampshire, Massachusetts, in a close, competitive family. She was one of 5 children. Her father, Fred Murray, worked hard and expected discipline. Her siblings describe a childhood filled with sports, structure, and strong bonds. Maura was a runner. Not casually but seriously. She competed in track and cross-country and had the stamina and mental toughness that endurance sports demand. Coaches described her as focused and resilient. She wasn't loud. She wasn't attention-seeking. She was driven. After high school, she enrolled at the United States Military Academy at West Point, an achievement that alone speaks volumes about her determination. West Point is not casual. It requires physical strength, academic discipline, and emotional endurance. But after a year, Maura transferred to the University of Massachusetts Amherst to pursue nursing. That decision has often been analyzed. Some speculate she was unhappy at West Point. Others say it was simply a shift in direction. What matters is this: she wasn't drifting. She had a plan. Nursing is structured, demanding, practical. By early 2004, she was a junior, close to graduation, close to starting her career. On paper, everything looked steady. But life isn't lived on paper. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, subtle fractures began to show. On February 5th, Maura was working a campus security shift when she received a phone call that visibly distressed her. A supervisor later said she appeared almost unresponsive, repeatedly mumbling the words, "My sister." It was later clarified that her sister had been struggling with personal issues, and Maura may have been emotionally overwhelmed. Was it just concern for family? Or was something heavier building? 2 days later, her father visited campus. They reportedly looked at used cars because Maura's Saturn had been unreliable. That night, she attended a dorm gathering. Sometime after midnight, she borrowed her father's Toyota Corolla and drove off campus. Around 3:30 a.m., she crashed it into a guardrail. Police responded. No one else was involved. No serious injuries. But it was concerning. 2 crashes in 3 days. Stress was accumulating. And then came Monday, February 9th. That morning, Maura emailed her professors saying there had been a death in the family and that she would be gone for a week. There had been no death. She also emailed her employer and told them she wouldn't be at work. Then she emailed her boyfriend, reassuring him and saying they would talk later. It was as if she was clearing space. Around lunchtime, she withdrew approximately $280, nearly all the money in her bank account. Security footage shows her alone at a liquor store buying alcohol. Vodka, Kahlua, Baileys, and boxed wine. She then packed some clothing, toiletries, and school books into her car. But here's something crucial. She did not tell anyone where she was going. Not her friends. Not her father. Not her boyfriend. Cell phone records later revealed she had searched for directions to locations in northern New Hampshire and Vermont, areas known for cabins and quiet retreats. It appears she intended to take a short break. A few days away. But why lie about a death? Why withdraw nearly all her cash? Why leave so abruptly? At approximately 4:30 p.m., she left campus in her black Saturn. The drive from Amherst to northern New Hampshire takes around 3 hours. It's scenic, mountainous, rural. As daylight faded into evening, Maura's car was seen along Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, a winding two-lane road bordered by dense woods and snow-covered terrain. Then, at 7:27 p.m., a neighbor heard a loud thud. Her Saturn had struck a snowbank near a sharp curve known locally as the Weathered Barn Corner. A school bus driver named Butch Atwood was driving home from his route when he noticed the crash. He stopped to check on her. He later told investigators she appeared shaken but not injured. She declined his offer to call police. She insisted she had already contacted roadside assistance. But cell service in that area was unreliable. Atwood found the interaction strange. He drove home just about 100 yards away and called 911 himself. Police were dispatched almost immediately. This is where the timeline tightens like a noose. From the time Atwood left the scene to when the first officer arrived, fewer than 10 minutes passed. When Officer Cecil Smith pulled up to the crash site, Maura Murray was gone. The car was locked. The airbags had deployed. A rag was found in the tailpipe. Red liquid stained the snow inside the vehicle. No footprints led deep into the woods. The temperature was below freezing. And just like that, she vanished. But the night was just beginning. And the questions were only starting. When Officer Cecil Smith pulled up to the crash site that night, the blue lights from his cruiser washed over an empty road. The Saturn sat angled into the snowbank, nose slightly damaged, driver's side door closed. The airbags had deployed. The inside of the vehicle was dimly lit. For a moment, it may have looked like a routine single-car accident. But something was off. He stepped out into the cold. It was below freezing. Snow covered the ground on both sides of the road. The air was still, quiet. The kind of rural silence that feels heavier at night. He approached the vehicle. No driver. No passenger. The car was locked. Inside, he noticed a strong odor of alcohol. There were red stains on the ceiling and seats, later determined to be wine. A Coke bottle filled with red liquid was found. The box of wine had been opened. And then there was something else. A rag had been stuffed into the Saturn's tailpipe. That detail would become one of the strangest elements of the entire case. Some later suggested Maura may have done that intentionally, possibly believing it would prevent smoke from the damaged engine from being visible to passing drivers or police. Others argued that theory made little sense mechanically. Either way, it was deliberate. It was something someone had physically placed there. But where was she? Officer Smith checked the immediate area. No one hiding behind the car. No obvious trail leading into the woods. The snow on both sides of the road appeared mostly undisturbed. Within minutes, additional responders arrived. The timeline is crucial. The bus driver had seen her alive. He had spoken with her. He had watched her near the car. He drove home. He called 911. Police arrived. And somewhere within that narrow window, less than 10 minutes, Maura Murray disappeared. If she had walked away on foot, she would have had to move quickly. But into what direction? Into the woods? Along the road? Toward another house? There were only a few residences nearby, and no neighbors reported seeing a young woman walking past their homes. Search efforts began almost immediately. That night, officers conducted a basic check of the surrounding area. But it was dark, cold. The terrain was uneven and wooded. The next morning, a more organized search began. Police dogs were brought in. The K9 units picked up Maura's scent near the driver's side door of the Saturn. The dogs tracked the scent east along Route 112 for approximately 100 yards. Then something happened that investigators still talk about today. The scent stopped, in the middle of the road. Not at the edge of the woods. Not behind a tree. Not at a nearby driveway. In the roadway itself. As if she had stepped into a vehicle. As if her trail simply ended because she was no longer walking. That single detail shifted the direction of the case. If she entered another vehicle voluntarily, who was driving it? If she was forced into a vehicle, why was there no sign of struggle? There were no skid marks from a second car. No debris. No witnesses reporting suspicious activity. And yet, the scent trail ending in the road suggests she did not simply wander off into the forest. Still, search teams combed the woods. Volunteers joined. Helicopters flew overhead scanning for any sign of clothing, footprints, or a body. Nothing. Days turned into weeks. Temperatures rose slightly, melting some of the snow. Still nothing. No backpack. No jacket. No trace. Her cell phone never pinged again. Her bank account was never accessed again. There was no verified use of her social security number. For someone attempting to start over, it would have been nearly impossible to remain financially invisible for long, especially in 2004. Investigators began reconstructing her final days. The fake email about a death in the family raised eyebrows. Why fabricate that? Some suggested she simply needed an excuse for a few days away. College students sometimes take impulsive trips. Stress can build quietly. But the withdrawal of almost all her cash added another layer. Was she planning something bigger? Then there was the alcohol. Investigators theorized that she may have been drinking while driving. The red liquid stains in the car suggested a container had opened during impact. If she feared being charged with driving under the influence, she may have panicked and left the scene to avoid police. That theory suggests she walked away quickly, perhaps intending to return later. But if that were the case, where did she go? The nearest gas station was miles away. There were no taxis passing through that stretch of road. Cell service was unreliable. And the temperatures that night were dangerously cold. Another theory emerged. What if someone driving along Route 112 saw a young woman alone beside a crashed vehicle and offered her a ride? In rural areas, it's not uncommon for neighbors or passers-by to stop and help. If she accepted a ride voluntarily, she may have believed she was simply getting assistance. But who was that driver? And why has no one ever come forward in more than 20 years? Law enforcement canvassed the area extensively. They spoke to residents. They reviewed any potential vehicles that may have passed through that corridor at the time. No definitive suspect emerged. As media attention grew, tips poured in. Some reported possible sightings in nearby towns. Others claimed to have seen someone matching Maura's description walking along the highway. But none were confirmed. Then came another complication. Conflicting witness accounts. The bus driver's description of Maura that night differed slightly from what responding officers later documented. There were small discrepancies in timeline details. Nothing dramatic, but enough to create friction in public discussion. The more people examined the case, the more questions surfaced. Why didn't police secure the scene more aggressively that first night? Why wasn't a larger perimeter search conducted immediately? Were early assumptions made that limited the scope of investigation? Over the years, the case attracted national attention. Television programs covered it. Online forums dissected every detail. Amateur investigators mapped timelines, analyzed weather reports, and scrutinized phone records. But no matter how deeply people dug, one fact remained unchanged. Maura Murray has never been found. Her father, Fred Murray, refused to let the case fade. He returned to New Hampshire countless times. Organized private searches, hired investigators, filed legal actions seeking access to case records. He has repeatedly stated that he believes someone knows what happened. He has urged anyone with even the smallest detail to come forward. Imagine the perspective of a parent. A final memory of your daughter alive. A phone call never answered. A stretch of road where she was last seen. And then decades of silence. As years passed, new technology was introduced. Ground-penetrating radar. Advanced cadaver dogs. Property searches of nearby homes. Several locations were examined based on tips. Each time, hope would rise. Each time, results came back inconclusive. There were moments when investigators announced renewed focus. Statements that the case remained active. That leads were being followed. But no arrest. No definitive statement. Some believe she fled into the woods to avoid a DUI charge and succumbed to exposure in an area not yet discovered. Others believe she entered a vehicle and encountered someone with malicious intent. A smaller group believes she intentionally disappeared, started over somewhere new. But that last theory weakens under scrutiny. No financial activity. No confirmed sightings. No communication. And those who knew her insist she would not abandon her family without a word. What complicates the case further is that every plausible explanation seems to collapse under closer examination. If she wandered into the woods, why has no trace surfaced despite extensive searches? If she was picked up, why has no driver ever come forward? If she planned to disappear, why leave behind essential belongings and sever all financial access? The timeline remains tight, the window small, and that is what makes the case so haunting. Because statistically, something happened within those missing minutes, and someone somewhere may have seen something. As the years move forward, one thing remains certain. On February 9, 2004, Maura Murray stood beside her crashed car on a rural New Hampshire road. She spoke to a bus driver. She declined help. And before police could reach her, she stepped out of sight. The road was quiet. The woods were dark. The cold was biting. And within minutes, she vanished. But the story doesn't end there. Because the deeper investigators looked, the stranger the surrounding circumstances began to feel. As the initial search efforts faded and winter gave way to spring, something else began to grow. Public fascination. What happened on that stretch of Route 112 didn't just remain a local mystery. It spread. Slowly at first, through news segments and regional headlines, and then nationally, fueled by the internet, forums, and long-form investigative discussions. And with attention came analysis. Every decision Maura made in the days before her disappearance was examined under a microscope. The email about a death in the family. The withdrawn cash. The alcohol. The car crashes. The rag in the tailpipe. Individually, none of those details prove anything sinister. But together they create a pattern that feels unstable, like something was unraveling. Some investigators believe Maura may have been overwhelmed. College pressure. Relationship strain. Family stress. 2 car accidents in 48 hours. Academic expectations in a demanding nursing program. Was she simply trying to get away for a few days? The searches on her computer for directions to Vermont and New Hampshire suggest she was planning something specific. She had previously vacationed in the White Mountains with her family. It wasn't unfamiliar territory. But if it was just a quiet getaway, why the secrecy? Why tell professors there had been a death? Why not simply say she was sick? Some have suggested the lie indicates urgency, perhaps embarrassment. Maybe she needed a reason that wouldn't invite follow-up questions. Others see it differently. They see a woman under mounting pressure who may have felt cornered by expectations. Academic, familial, personal, and needed space. But that still doesn't explain what happened after the crash. The scent trail ending in the road continues to be one of the most debated aspects of the case. Canine tracking is not infallible. Weather conditions, time delays, and environmental factors can disrupt scent trails. But the idea that her trail stopped abruptly in the roadway strongly suggests she either entered a vehicle or the scent was lost due to traffic contamination. If she entered a vehicle, it likely happened quickly. The crash site was not heavily trafficked, but cars did pass through that area. Could someone have pulled over and offered assistance? In rural communities, stopping to help a stranded driver is not unusual. If Maura feared being charged with driving under the influence, she may have preferred to accept a ride from a stranger rather than wait for police. That moment, that split-second decision, may have changed everything. Another possibility is that she began walking and was later picked up farther down the road, beyond the initial search perimeter. Search teams focused heavily on the immediate woods surrounding the crash site. But if she had walked along the road for some distance before entering another vehicle, the scent trail could have been misleading. There are also those who argue that she could have wandered into the forest in a state of panic or intoxication and succumbed to exposure in an area not yet discovered. The terrain is dense, uneven, snow-covered at the time. It is possible, they argue, that her remains could be hidden beneath layers of forest floor and seasonal growth. Yet search efforts have been extensive. Cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, volunteer searches spanning miles. Nothing definitive. In 2006, a private investigator working with the Murray family conducted additional searches. In 2013 and again in later years, Specific properties near the crash site were examined after new tips emerged. Each time hope surged. Each time results were inconclusive. The passage of time has only deepened the divide between theories. Some lean heavily toward foul play. They point to the short time window, the abrupt scent ending, the absence of physical evidence in the woods, the possibility of an opportunistic predator passing through a rural highway at night. Others emphasize statistics. In cases of missing persons following vehicle accidents, exposure and disorientation are not uncommon factors. People sometimes attempt to avoid legal consequences and make irrational decisions. But here is what complicates that theory. If Maura wandered into the woods and perished due to the elements, some physical trace would likely have surfaced by now. A piece of clothing, a bone fragment, something. And yet, more than 20 years later, there has been no confirmed recovery. Then there's the theory that she intentionally disappeared, that she staged a situation and walked away. But experts point out how difficult it is to vanish completely without resources, especially in 2004. She withdrew only $280. There was no evidence of planning beyond a short trip. No new identity activity. No long-term financial preparation. Her family strongly rejects the idea that she abandoned them voluntarily. Her father, Fred Murray, has remained a constant presence in the case. He has openly criticized aspects of the investigation. He has pushed for transparency. He has spent years retracing her final known steps. The emotional toll on a family in this position is difficult to overstate. Not knowing is its own kind of burden. No confirmed crime scene. No answers. Just a stretch of road and a silence that has lasted decades. In recent years, renewed attention has brought incremental developments. Law enforcement has reiterated that the case remains active. Evidence has been re-examined. Properties near the crash site have been searched again using updated technology. In 2022, investigators executed a search warrant at a property in Haverhill based on new information. The search generated headlines. Many hoped it would finally bring closure. It did not. Authorities have remained cautious in their public statements. They have not ruled out foul play. They have not confirmed accidental death. They have not endorsed the voluntary disappearance theory. They have simply maintained that the case remains open. And that may be the most haunting aspect of all. After 2 decades, it is still not categorized definitively. It remains a missing persons case. One frozen moment in time. A crashed car. A brief interaction with a bus driver. A police cruiser arriving minutes too late. If you drive Route 112 today, the curve looks unremarkable. Just another bend in a rural highway. Trees standing quietly. Snow in winter. Leaves in summer. But for those who know the story, it feels different. It feels like a question suspended in the air. Because somewhere between 7:27 and 7:36 p.m. on February 9, 2004, something happened. A decision was made. A vehicle may have slowed. A door may have opened. Footsteps may have moved across frozen pavement. And then, nothing. No confirmed sightings. No verified communication. No resolution. Maura Murray was 21 years old. A nursing student. A daughter. A sister. A runner who once pushed herself mile after mile toward a finish line. And on that winter night, her path simply disappeared. So what do you believe happened in those missing minutes? Did she step into a stranger's vehicle, trusting the wrong person? Did she flee into the darkness trying to avoid trouble, only to encounter something worse? Or is there a detail, overlooked, underestimated, that could still unlock the truth? Let me know your theory in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into America's most haunting unsolved disappearances and cold cases, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Because sometimes the smallest unanswered moment becomes the biggest mystery of all.